Hi, everyone. I wanted to talk today about audience analysis and its importance in all communications that you do. And this applies to technical reporting as well. So, one of the first things you want to consider whenever you're communicating, whether that's orally or in writing, is who you're writing or communicating to and what they might already know. And so, the process of audience analysis is a really strong first step when you begin to think about how you're going to deliver your message. So think about who your audience is. What do they know? What do they not know? If you're writing to a very broad general audience, you're going to need to spend more time defining terms, making sure everybody's on the same page. If you're writing to a team of experts in the field already, you can be a little bit more concise and not need to explain things quite so much. And then you want to also consider what they're going to be doing with your writing. Are they reading your writing just for the purpose of entertainment, to teach themselves something, to buy something? Oftentimes, when we are technical writing or technical reporting, we are writing to people to teach them how to do something. So, whether that's how to use a new software, how to install a new app, how to use a new phone, we are teaching them how to do something. And so that involves us providing steps, explanations, cautions, and warnings. And the best writers analyze their audience. So we think about who they are, what they need, what they know, what they don't know, and then we adapt to that audience. And so that means we first assess them, and then we determine, okay, how can I best approach this writing assignment? So there are four types of audience members, and we'll talk a little bit about each of these. So you have the experts, the technicians, the executives, and the non-specialists. And when you are getting into audience analysis, you should usually know, just kind of upon doing your little brainstorming yourself, who could be included in your audience. So I was a technical writer in a former life, and I knew that my audience was typically people in their 40s to 70s, that they were homeowners, that they were in a certain income bracket, and that they were pretty new to technology. This was in the early 2000s. And so the internet for a lot of people was quite new. Using terms like HTML would not have been something that most of my users knew. So being able to communicate in a way that was friendly to that audience. And so they would have been quantified or qualified as non-specialists. And we'll come back to this four types of audience. So when we think about our audience, we think about, okay, who are they? Again, what do they know? What's their background? Are they novice? Are they complete noobs to this process? Or do they already know how to do it? And this is kind of a refresher. Are they a reader? Are they just reading it for pleasure or for information? Or are they actually going to follow through with your steps to do it? And sometimes we write instructions, like I have a pet sitter for my pets. And so I might write instructions about, okay, this cat needs a pill this time of day, and you need to feed this cat this. It's because I know they're going to do it. But we might have people who are just reading for, oh, I want to learn about savings and investing, but I'm not ready to act on it yet. What do they expect when they read your document? As in, do they expect everything to be laid out for them from start to finish? Do they expect it to be kind of an introductory level primer to what you're talking about? And then lastly, you want to think about other demographic characteristics. And sometimes these affect how you write, sometimes they don't. So I mentioned before that when I was a technical writer, my audience I knew was of a certain age, so middle to elder age. They were mostly in the Midwest at the time. Most of them lived in smaller cities or rural communities. Most of them were educated, at least with a high school degree, sometimes a college degree. Most of them were heterosexual married couples, and I was living in Fargo, North Dakota at the time, and that is a quite red or Republican state. That didn't really factor into my writing and my approach very much, but it's usually good to know, especially if you're talking about something that could push buttons of your audience members, kind of where they lie on the political spectrum. So sometimes those demographics play a role, sometimes they don't. The things get complicated when you mix your audiences. So when you have people who are complete novices, they have no idea of any of the information you're talking about, with people who are technically experts in the field. And so you have to find that middle ground that pleases both of them, or you have to maybe craft two different styles of writing. One of the questions that writers always have to think about and have to address is, do we go for the lowest level or for the majority? And if you think about newspapers, even though newspapers are on death's door, it seems, most newspapers are written for about an 8th grade level reading. And that's presumably because at one time when newspapers were big, that was what you could usually ensure your audience had, at least an 8th grade level of education. And we kind of think about those things when we are reading information that is meant to go to the entire citizenship. You have to write at a level that most people can understand. And so if you know that you have a mixture of novices and experts in your field, you as the writer have to decide how you're going to satisfy both of those types of audiences. So when you think about images and communication, this is an advertisement. You can probably tell that it's an advertisement for McDonald's. There's very little text here, but stop and think about for a second who you think this is geared toward. Obviously, it's a billboard, so it's going to be people who are driving. Usually billboards are found on busier roads, highways, interstates. And it's going to presume that the audience is familiar enough with the McDonald's arches to recognize the colors of McDonald's, the yellow and the red, and to not even need to see the entire symbol or logo for McDonald's to know what's coming. And this might be an example of an advertisement that appeals to lowest level, as in children. Children don't need to have reading ability yet to recognize a place like McDonald's. And so this might be, you know, you're in your car with your kids, and from the back seat, they see this little chunk of the Golden Arches, and they're like, hey, there's a McDonald's in the neighborhood. So you're not necessarily presuming an audience that has a lot of advanced knowledge on any topic other than, I know the McDonald's symbol when I see it. I know those colors. I know that at the next left, I have the opportunity to go to McDonald's. This piece, a little bit more complicated, more to read. It might not be possible to read all of it when you're driving on the road. This might be something that you would need to have the use of repetition with your audience. Maybe people commuting back and forth to work every day, taking the same route. It might appeal to people who are in the process of living in a place they're not in love with, who are starting to look for homes. And obviously you have a bunch of cardboard boxes stacked on top of each other. You have what appears to be handwritten kitchen, living room, bath, garage. So we know that we are putting items in different areas of a house. We have the Edina Realty. We know that it's a realty company. So we know that it's people who are interested in investing in homes. And we have helping 23,000 buyers a year into new homes. I don't know where this billboard was advertised, and I don't know, I can't fact check that right now because I don't know the context and the market it was in. Edina is a realtor that is pretty broad, but it's not maybe as eye-catching as the previous one. You have that little pop of red, but it's definitely geared to a specific group of people, people who are actively looking or thinking about purchasing a home and starting that process. It also presumes in this economic market a certain level of income that people are able to afford or at least start to look for home ownership. This picture, again, you have that brighter color, you have a Disney character, I'd clap if my arms were longer. The newly expanded Disney California Adventure Park, Disneyland Resort just got happier. Again, the color, the character, the logo of Disneyland probably going to immediately appeal first to children because it's going to be a character they're familiar with, and then to parents who are familiar as well. So people who are in the process of possibly planning a family vacation, and there's not as much going on in this one as the previous one, a little bit quicker, easier to read. And Disneyland, from what I've heard, I've never been, but it's expensive. So you are assuming, again, a certain income level for your audience who's getting this message. So when you begin to adapt to your audience, you need to think about what information do they need, and you need to provide the right information. So I like to cook sometimes, and sometimes when I find a recipe that I like, I don't always read it all the way through before I start cooking it, which I honestly should, because sometimes I will get to a point and they don't embed it until later that I need this ingredient. Versus the recipes that I prefer, they tell you up front, here's everything you need, here's how long it's going to take, here are some options. Because if you don't tell me I need a lemon until step 6 and I don't have a lemon, that's going to be really frustrating for me as a user. So giving them the right information when they need it. Guiding your reader means you are using things like headings, subheadings, bulleted lists, numbered lists, that you are bolding things that need attention. So if there's any chance that they could hurt themselves or equipment, that you're telling them up front, like don't dry your hair while you're in the bathtub. People need to know that if they've never dried their hair and they don't know when and how to do that. And then one of the things that is important for technical reporting especially is that you are clear and crisp and concise in your writing. Many times people don't even read user manuals. You know, they just kind of wing it, figure it out themselves. And only when they get in a pinch do they decide, oh, I should consult the manual. And so you don't want to read something that's paragraphs long, that's really windy and lofty and, you know, beautifully written with lots of similes and metaphors. There's a time and place for that, but it's not in technical reporting. And then making your document visually appealing. Think about when you've ever read bad instructions or overly detailed instructions or too sparse of instructions, things that are just hard to find. This is again where lists, bullets, headings, subheadings, the use of white space, making sure that when you have a bullet that is at the very bottom of a page, that it doesn't have one little lonely bullet sitting on the next one, that things go together, that they look visually attractive. You don't have a ton of time to catch people's attention. Things like resumes. It's a real quick scan, so we need to be able to see what's happening quickly. So providing the right information means giving readers information they need to understand. And if there is an absolute series of steps that they need to take, like 1, 2, 3, you have to go in this order, you need to tell them that up front. If there can be some deviation, let them know that too. Oftentimes, you might include some background information. So let's say I was just looking at taking a painting class, and it was about barn quilts, those kind of geometrical things you see on the outside of people's barns. I would need to know how long does it take? What kind of materials do I need to make sure that it's weatherproof? What's the history of why people put quilts on their barns and why are they called quilts? So giving people some information like that, they can choose whether they want to read it or not, but some people are going to be interested in that. And then definitions, terms, jargon, acronym. We're not all going to come from the same places of expertise. And what I know in my role as an instructor, as a writer, as an editor, I'm going to be familiar with some terminology that I would not be familiar with if you're talking about first aid and nursing and doing anything with kinesiology. I'm going to need some definitions. So just because you know it really well doesn't mean your reader will know it really well. So if there's a possibility that your reader doesn't know a term or an acronym or a shorthand version of something, tell them what that is. If there are things that your reader doesn't need to know, you don't need to put that in there. And that can be something you can decide later in various versions of the draft. Changing the level of information. you might have the right information, but the wrong technical level or wrong kind of audience. So for example, an expert audience rather than a technician audience. So people who are experts, they know everything about this. Maybe they've designed the software. They don't need you to write out for them how to install it. But a technician who might be working with actual clients in their homes might need more information because they're going to be working with people who are novices. So again, think about who is reading your document. Examples are always a great way to help people understand if they're on the right track. Again, I'm going to go back to that cooking example. I've baked cookies for many years of my life, and I know at this point, because I've baked them enough, when they are mostly done. But if it's the first time I've ever baked a cookie, how do I know what golden brown is? How golden, how brown? How do I know if it's too puffed or not puffed enough? And how do I know if it's going to kind of set itself when I take it out of the oven and put it on a rack? So I need to have some of that information, especially if it's my first time, of what to look for. And then you can change those examples as necessary depending on your audience. So guiding the reader through your writing, again, means using things like how you organize it. So having some kind of introduction, maybe a little bit of background information, tools, equipment they're going to need, about how much time something's going to take, and then thinking about chunking that information and making it visually appealing. We have lots of great software now. We have things like Canva, we have things like Word templates, we have things like AI assistants that can help us, but we want to make it appealing and easy to scan through, easy to read, and easy to find. And think about this when you look at your textbooks. Usually there's kind of a preview in the beginning of what's happening in the chapter. There are some bullet points, there's some little call out boxes, maybe there's a little story somewhere. And at the end of the chapter, there's a summary, some final takeaways, some final questions. So being able to visually set things in a way that makes the reader want to stay on the page and can locate information they need quickly. And then when you need to, putting things in bullet points, putting things in numbered steps, and making them consistent, not having different fonts, different sizes, making everything cohesive and look as though it goes together. And then creating topic sentences for paragraphs and paragraph groups, which just means that each beginning of each section is a short, crisp sentence. It's straightforward, it's direct, and it's quick to read. It's not a very long, lengthy sentence with lots of commas. It's not a compound sentence, and it doesn't have lots of frilly words in it. So everything is quickly scannable, and I can go through it with my eyes and kind of digest the information quickly. So when you are writing as a technical writer or reporter, you are using a command type of language. So instead of, I think you should go to the Department of Motor Vehicles and apply for your license renewal, you directly address your readers. So go to the Department of Motor Vehicles, or DMV. You are giving us commands. And when you are giving us commands, you can usually omit the you, the your, because it's presumed. It's just like when you stop at a stop sign. The word stop in red with white lettering stands out so that you see it quickly. And you know, because you are the one sitting at the intersection, that it's talking to you. So think the same way when you are thinking about writing commands for your audience. Again, keep your sentences short and to the point. Keep your subjects and verbs together and at the beginning of the sentence. So instead of the ball was hit by him, he hit the ball. It's just tighter. It makes more sense. It's more easy to digest. And then once you have written your rough draft, that is when you can kind of go put everything, as we call it, on a diet. You're getting rid of that verbal clutter, that verbal fluff that doesn't need to be there. And you will start to find the more you do this type of writing, I think the more enjoyable and kind of fun it is to see, okay, how can I make this shorter and more clear? It is definitely an art. And if you're used to a lot of creative writing or essay writing, then you're going to have to stretch your muscles in a new way that will be challenging and maybe frustrating at first, but I think will also be a really great skill for you to acquire, because writing in a technical writing fashion is something that's really, really useful in the workplace. All right, and then making your documents visually appealing. So this means that you are probably adding some pictures. When I was a technical writer, I did obviously write out the steps, but I also included images. So when a person is installing a new lighting system that turns on automatically, they need to know what wires to connect. They need to know what buttons to push, and pictures definitely help. Breaking up things into usable chunks. So if you have a process that takes 30 steps to complete, you might want to think about how to break that up. Think about things like gardening. You don't just say, go buy a plant, put it in the ground and water it. You might have selecting the right plant for you, preparing your soil, putting the plant in the ground, and then maintaining, watering, feeding, and fertilizing your plant. So that might be 5 separate distinct headings. Headings and lists are going to be important, and this is where things like templates in Word or Canva can be really helpful, making sure that those are consistently sized and formatted. So whether they're all bold and 16 point, but that you're not throwing a bunch of different styles, that it looks good together. And then again, making sure that everything just appears as though it's a unified whole, that I can quickly visually scan it, see what I need to get, find the information quickly, but that it all looks like it goes together. So I think I mentioned that I was going to go back to this slide and I didn't come back to it. The 4 types of audience. You have your experts. Again, these are the people who know everything about the topic. They don't need as many step-by-steps. They don't need a lot of definitions and terms. They already know it. Technicians are going to be people who are probably in the field working with customers and clients. They're going to need a bit more detail. They know the system well, they know the product well, but they're not going to be as knowledgeable as the expert. Executives are people who might be funding the project. They know roughly enough to do a sales pitch of it, but they don't know all the ins and outs. They're not going to be as familiar with some of the ways to install, how to use all of the features, and what the extent of the usefulness of them are. But they'll have a rough idea. And then you have your non-specialists, are the people who are green. They are the noobs, they are the novices, they don't know much about it. They might be familiar with it, but they've never used it before. And so usually when we are buying a new product, if it's brand new to us, we're going to be the non-specialists. But for instance, I'm getting a new phone today, a new used phone, but I have an older model. It's about 3 models older than the current one I'm getting. And so I'm familiar with the brand, I'm familiar with kind of the functionality, but there will be new parts that I don't know that I need to learn about. So I'm still a non-specialist. I didn't design it. I don't know how it all works. I have experience with it, but I will need to brush up on the things that are new to me. So I hope that helps as far as what it means to start thinking about who your audience is, how to adapt to that audience and what they need, how to lay out your information in a visually appealing way, how to craft your sentences so that they're concise and clear and straightforward. This will be something we come back to as we write, in whatever communication class that you're taking. You always want to begin with, who's my audience? Who am I writing to? What do they know? What do they not know? What do they need to know? And how can I best present that information to them? Hope that helps. Have a great one, everybody. Take care.